What's going on, everybody? We are back. We have episode number 55 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight, we're going to break down UFC Vegas 30, Gane versus Volkov. Tonight, we're going to be without Lags. He's got some stuff with his family going on back home. And C will not be with us until the Connor card. So that's when he will be making his comeback to the podcast. So, yeah, you got myself, Adam MMA Fox, John Stargarian, here with my boy Luke at SWR_betting. We're going to break it down for you guys. First, please, if you like the podcast, drop a like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. It would help us out a lot. And also, if you have never deposited on BetOnline before, now's a good time to do so. If you use our promo code CLUBSUB at betonline.ag, you get a 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 deposit. So, yeah, we're going to get right into this thing. Hopefully this week, maybe we can give you guys some winners. The last 2 weeks have been tragic, to say the least. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this card. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, definitely not one that I was anticipating to have as much action on as I do, and I have 13 units on the card. So, yeah, we're letting it fly this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good week to bounce back. So only place we can go is up after last week. But yeah, so first fight of the night, we got Yancy Medeiros taking on Damir Hadzovic. This is a rebook from a fight that I believe was scheduled about 3 weeks ago. Luke, I believe you have a play here. What do you got?
Yeah, so I just like fight violence in general. I think Yancy, it's actually pretty shocking. The dude's actually only like 33 years old, which is pretty crazy looking back at it for how long he's been in the UFC, because the guy's probably like 40, 45 in fight years. But yeah, so he's kind of started to get tagged, get dinged, knocked out a few more times. His pace actually is ironically slowed a little bit in terms of his offensive output in recent years. But, statistically over the aggregate, pretty high volume. And, pretty much how Hadzovic is losing is, he's getting Russell fucked and fighting a lot of primary grappling based fighters. So ultimately, I think both guys are going to kind of give each other that standing fight that they like and they really need to succeed. In that, I'm still really not sold on the durability of both. It seems that both hit, relatively hard. In terms of the grappling, I know Yancy pretty much almost never wrestles, but he does have some subs in there too. And from what we've seen from Hadzovic on the ground, he's pretty lost on bottom. So I do think there's a finish path for Yancy there should, some grappling transitions happen in the fight. But largely, like I said, I think it'll be a standing striking based affair where I think somebody goes down, and I think it's actually Hadzovic personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I bet the under last time, and I think I had plus 110. I'm probably going to play it right after we get off here. To be honest with you, until you and I were chatting right before this, I had kind of just assumed that the books had lined it basically where it closed, which I think was at minus 120. But I'm looking now. I see some plus 150s out there, some plus 135s. I'm probably going to play it. I agree with you. I mean, first of all, they're two guys. While it's on the feet, both guys are hittable, in particular Yancy, and Hadzovic can crack a bit. And, you mentioned it on the ground. Damir has virtually no ground game at all. Not like Yancy's some kind of a proactive grappler, but I do think it's a kind of situation where if Yancy does get on top of him or some scramble happens, he's a pretty live bet to sub him here. Damir is just not reliable in that anywhere where the grappling takes place. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess if you had forced me to pick a side, I'd take Yancy just because the guy's had way more fights in the UFC. To your point, he's still only 33. Like, I know he looked bad against like Lando Venata in his last fight, but I mean, I kind of think Venata would take care of Hadzovic, to be honest with you. So Yancy would be my lean. I don't trust him with the chin, but I do think the under is a great spot here. Moving on, we got Charles Rosa taking on the guitar hero, Justin James. I have no bet here. I guess, I know it's very easy to dog on Charles Rosa because of that fight against Eric Minner. But, if you guys recall, we talked about it on this podcast that, people that proactively grapple Rosa are going to be able to put him on the ground. He doesn't really do a lot to work up. So if you can avoid the subs from top, you're going to beat him. And we've seen that with virtually every guy that's put Minner on his back, or not Minner, Rosa on his back. But I kind of think Rosa consistently gets just dismissed as a striker, which is kind of weird. The guy was up 2 rounds against Shane Burgos, and before he got finished in the third round of that fight. 2 fights ago, I played him against Kevin Aguilar, and again, he was pretty dismissed out of hand. And look, it was a close fight. You can make the argument he lost. But the bottom line is, Rosa keeps a high pace. He kind of fights with that weird who's the Canadian that got cut? That used to throw all kinds
Elias.
Yeah, he fights with that weird Elias style. And so I guess I just don't think James is likely to outstrike him on the feet. I think he's very live to land a nuke, but I think if he doesn't get that nuke in the first 6 or 7 minutes before the gas runs out, Rosa's probably going to take over the fight. James, in theory, has a wrestling path here. He's a good wrestler. But again, like, James has no gas tank. I don't think he's going to be able to wrestle hard for more than 6 minutes. And once he gets tired, him getting subbed from bottom wouldn't shock me. So I don't really have much interest in a play here. I think the line's pretty much right on. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I leaned Rosa as well, but just kind of in a weird kind of funky fight in general that I don't really want to be invested in. But I guess from a quick side narrative perspective, I guess Rosa did leave ATT. I guess the one coach that brought him there kind of parted ways and went to another gym. And I guess he's actually spent a decent amount of time down at Sanford in prep for this one. And I guess his neck is fully healed. His thumb is good to go. So I guess, he's more healthy than he's been pretty much in his entire UFC career, which I think is interesting. And because he's had so many of those like neck issues in the past, he really hasn't been able to like wrestle at all in training. So he said he's taken a pretty heavy wrestling, base in terms of in prep for this fight. It seems like he's also made a pretty cognitive change in terms of his defense and realizing he needs to kind of improve that from just, throwing those naked kicks. He tends not to get his hands up, and that's kind of where he gets tagged. So he says he's kind of addressed that. Once again, complete narrative. We haven't seen it. But, I mean, if the guys went out there and, really, really drilled his wrestling and, now he's stuffing takedowns or even, shooting takedowns on Janes, potentially not getting hit with bombs. I mean, Rosa's probably going to look like a pretty solid play at the number. But as you know, we don't really like to play stuff based on narrative. But I do think that's encouraging. I mean, I'm hearing all the right things from the guy going into the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rose is clearly the more skilled fighter. It's just a matter of, I don't know, betting against Justin James is scary. It's terrifying for about 6 minutes.
Dropped Gavin Tucker, and I had a big bet on Gavin Tucker right off the start. I'm like, oh no, Gavin, and then obviously
closed like Tucker minus 120.
I got him actually at Pick'em. I got him at plus 100 when it came down. I think Janes, was like minus 190, or no, it was like Tucker minus 190, and it got bet all the way down. I don't think the guy's very good, to be honest. But
he was plus 100 against Gavin Tucker, or plus 100 against him, and now Charles Rose is minus 170 against him. MMA is a hell of a sport, man. I'm going to stay with you here. We got Julia Avila taking on Julija Stoliarenko.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to unpack here. Stoliarenko, armbar chick, I think brown belt in jiu-jitsu, judo background too. Pretty much a punching bag at space. Her offensive striking is pretty much not there. She actually got outstruck by Leah Letson by like 20 significant strikes, which isn't particularly encouraging. But the one thing for the girl I will say is that she is tough as nails. And Avila comes forward and she can crack. So, I guess if there's, some sneaky angle for Stoliarenko, people might talk about, the Eubanks fight. Eubanks put her in that arm triangle. But the problem with Stoliarenko is she doesn't possess any offensive wrestling upside at all. And so all the transitions come from, her pulling guard, rolling leg locks, like clinch type stuff. And that's actually kind of Avila's base too. So I don't see a sub from her. So I think it's a pretty solid spot for Avila, barring she just minds her P's and Q's and doesn't make small mistakes. She should roll pretty clearly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't bet Avila, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that I considered it. To be honest, I know the number's crazy, and like my butt is still kind of sore from betting Lara Procopio as a favorite last week. But these WMA favorites kill me. But, with that said, I just, like you touched on it, like where does Stoliarenko win this fight? It's easy, like you said, to look at the Eubanks fight, but we see it with grapplers all the time. There's a big difference from being held down on bottom and getting subbed when you're in top position. They're just two very different skill sets. And to Avila's credit, like, I don't think she has poor submission defense at all. I think the issue was Eubanks is just a better wrestler with a very good top game. Stoliarenko is not a better wrestler. I don't know. I mean, do you see a scenario where Stoliarenko could outpoint her on the feet? Like,
No, not with the aggression that she has. Like I said, dude, she got outlanded by Leah Letson at distance by like 20 strikes, who's fucking horrible. Like,
yeah. I just, it's so, like, I don't ever want to say a woman's 90%. She's probably not that high, but like, it's hard for me to believe she's not 85%. I kind of agree with the angle on doesn't go to decision could be interesting here. I think that's a plus number, and Avila cracks for a girl, and also will throw ground and pound in top position. So she's going to probably get top position at some point, and if she doesn't, Stolyarenko's probably fucked. But yeah, I mean, no play. Moving on, we got Marcin Prachnio taking on Ike Villanueva. This is an interesting one since Prachnio was basically fed to Khalil Roundtree to die and get cut from the UFC in his last fight, won that fight, and now currently sits as a minus 190 favorite against Villanueva. The funny thing is here, I don't, despite that seeming recency bias, it's tough for me to really argue too much with the line. I guess the problem is if you're going to take a stance on Prachnio is the guy just puts himself in positions to get KO'd. Like, it's not, I wouldn't even say it was like right? I mean, I wouldn't even say it was like a chinny thing so much as the guy will just walk forward with his chin in the air asking for you to take his head off. And it's like, okay, he was a little bit more restrained against Khalil, but also like Khalil, he's just not the kind of guy, he's so worried about gassing who's going to really, kind of go crazy and try to get you out of there, whereas Villanueva is. And I think Villanueva forcing him to make one of those mistakes is very live. With that said, I remember when Villanueva joined the UFC last year and you played the Vanilla Gorilla against him. And I was like, oh God, like how can you play chase against anybody? And then, you tape this guy. Villanueva is not good. I mean, Prachnio unquestionably is more skilled. The line's probably right. It's something I think is interesting, and I haven't played it, but like Prachnio and Roundtree was minus 400 to go to not go the distance. This is minus 200 now. The finishing dynamic hasn't changed that much at all, except Villanueva is probably live for a finish longer than Roundtree was. I think that's kind of interesting personally, but I haven't touched it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, what I will say, at least in regards to the Roundtree fight, I'm not 100% sold that, Prachnio is like improved really defensively at all. I really think that if there were multiple points in that fight where Prachnio ate some pretty flush shots and Khalil just decided not to follow up on any of them, and he very well could have got him out of there, in my opinion, if he decided to step on the gas in those scenarios. But, he didn't. Prachnio was a really big underdog in that fight, and I think there could be a tad bit of recency bias on his line here because it wasn't that long ago the guy's going out there and getting deaded in the first 5 minutes of every single fight too. So Villanueva, I've just been pretty vocal. I don't think he's a UFC caliber fighter, but to your point, he will go forward. He will do things. Yeah. And so based on that, he's going to force action in the fight. He's not very good defensively either. Honestly, I'd probably trust Ike's durability a little bit more than I would Prachnio, if I'm being completely honest. So gun to my head, if I was to play it, I think Ike's the side, but even Ike KO, I think is plus 300. That's kind of interesting. 25%. I think it should be, a little tighter.
Probably a large portion of his win percent, of his win condition, right? You would think. I don't think.
Yeah, well, he's pretty small. He's not like a big guy either at 205. I mean, in my opinion, he's just kind of a fat middleweight. Really, if I'm being candid, I don't know. Put it this way, I just don't recommend anybody laying the chalk on Prachnio.
I agree. We move on. I think we're going to probably skip over this fight, Luke, unless you have something to add. But late replacement, Jeremiah Wells replaced Ramazan Ameev. I haven't had a chance to look at it. Have you?
I have not, no.
Okay, so we're going to skip that one. I guess just the only thing I would say is Worley Alves is the kind of guy you bet when he's plus 200, not when he's minus 200. But we move on to a fight you do have a bet on. We got Michelle, the Tractor, Prazeres, taking on Shavkat Ramonov. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, originally didn't think I was going to play this just because I've given Prazeres obviously some credit over the years, and his record would suggest that as well. Beat some solid guys in there and Tyson off, Gilbert Burns, even though that's not the same Gilbert Burns, if I'm being completely candid. I think everybody would agree with that. But nonetheless, still a good name to have on the rap sheet. But a big part of making the bet is just pretty much how bad Prazeres looked in his last outing against Nardiev. Nardiev was a guy who came in who, had a decent amount of hype on him and just turned out to not pan out at all and got cut within a couple years, I believe. I think he's fighting over in Beirut or something now.
Young, he's very young.
Yeah, he's only 25, but nonetheless, I think Prazeres got like 6 minutes of control time, but like only half of that was actually on the ground. The other was like via cage push. And he still got like 3x on strikes essentially too. So that's kind of my thing. Like obviously the path for Prazeres is wrestling. That's what he's always done, but he just doesn't really do anything on top. I know he's got a couple of those north-south chokes, but in the aggregate doesn't really do much. So outside of him like landing an overhand right or getting like 10 plus minutes of top time here, I just struggled to see him winning. Because like I said, even in the Nardia fight, in the success that he still did have, it was the more effective striking that was still losing him rounds in terms of the card. So I kind of see the same scenario here, despite actually Prazeres never being finished in his UFC run. I do think Rakhmonov's probably pretty live for a finish. I think Prazeres closes distance pretty horribly. And he's got about 5 minutes of gas. And, so Rakhmonov isn't necessarily the guy who's going to go out here and like lands, 6 strikes per minute or anything like that. But when he kind of smells blood in the water, I've noticed he kind of tends to really then go and get after guys. And so slowing down against that type of archetype and a guy who's, shown competency in terms of the ground when he's been taken down, he's going to make you work. He will attack stuff. He does have sweet potential. So I got in at a decent line at minus 255. I know he's taken some more steam, but I just think Prazeres is done. 39 years old, looked pretty bad 2 years ago, 2-year layoff. Win conditions pretty limited.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about playing Prazeres, but I really want a better number. To be honest, my issue is, look, I'm not a Shavkat guy at all. As you know, I bet Brazilian Cowboy pretty big against him in his debut. Look, I'm not saying he's not an athlete, but I think the guy has had glaring defensive holes. But sort of to your point, Prazeres closes distance like shit. And so it's really a question of, can Prazeres badly out-grapple him? Well, kind of to your point, this is what scares me. The Nardia fight aged at the time, everybody's like, oh, he lost to a pretty strong prospect, not a big deal. But then you see Nardia get out-grappled by Chancellor Encounter fairly badly. You see him get out-grappled by Sean Brady, and it's not like Brady was really doing anything that clever to out-grapple him. And yet Prazeres really struggled to kind of have much success there. And so, that's fairly concerning. Then you add in a 2-year PED suspension, a knee surgery. He's 40. He checks a lot of the boxes that I'm looking for to fade Shavkat. He's got double the fights. He's fought real high-level competition. He's a very good grappler. But he also ticks a couple boxes where I'm like, fuck. Like, you could sell me. If you told me after the fight Prazeres looked like a minus 200 favorite and just dominated him in the grappling, I wouldn't be overtly shocked. But you could also tell me he could look like a plus 700 dog here, and I guess that's the thing for me is like, the questions. I think if I got plus 300 on Prazeres, I'd maybe take a small stab. But the questions with him at his age, especially coming off a fight when he didn't look very good and was allegedly on PEDs, that's remarkably concerning for me. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still looking to fade Shavkat, but this isn't the spot for me, I don't think.
I mean, even Prazeres decisions like +4 something. I don't think that's a terrible poke if you're looking towards the Prazeres side.
Yeah. The thing is, it's still really the same question, right? Though it's like, what are we getting? Like, I can't expect to have the Prazeres from 4 years ago. Like, that's for sure. And it's like Shavkat. I mean, at least beating Brazilian Cowboy, even though I don't think it happened the most impressive of ways, is getting a win against the confident UFC welterweight. But we'll see. Moving on, we have a bet that makes me sick to my stomach here. We have Kennedy and Sejiku taking on Danilo Marquez. Oh, God. I bet Carl Silberg against Kennedy in his last fight. I bet Khadis Ibragimov against Danilo in his first fight. So 2 guys I haven't had much success betting on here, but I bet Kennedy here. Do I feel good about it? No. I mean, not particularly. It's just one of those things, though, where coming into the UFC, my view was Danilo's not a good wrestler. He's proactive about it, but he's just not very good at it. That didn't really change a lot after watching the Cadiz fight. And now, you see people talking about him, like he's this really good grappler. He's beat Mike Rodriguez. Mike fucking Rodriguez is a 40% takedown defense. The guy has literally no idea what he's doing on the fence. There's no attempt to grab a wizard, no real attempt to really get over-unders in the clinch and turn the position. I mean, he just literally, as soon as he basically gets blown on, he falls over. That's Mike Rodriguez. And on bottom, he's horrible. And so Kennedy, on the other hand, I have very, very serious doubts about Kennedy's bottom game. Like, he's put himself in bad positions. But what I will say is when he does get taken down, he does explode back to his feet like very fast. So it's one of those things where you have to lock down position quick or he's going to be up. And, in terms of getting him down, I'm not sure I buy that Marquez can do it. Craig went 1 of 17 on takedowns. I'm not sure Marquez is a better wrestler than Craig is, to be completely honest. He'll go for that single in space, but he's not great at finishing there. He tends to, press guys to the fence, look for a body lock, and drag them down from there. And, that's something you can do kind of against low-level competition. And look, I'm not saying Kennedy's not low-level. Obviously, he is. But, we've seen Kennedy show an ability in the clinch to grab an overhook and work for an underhook and reverse position. He's actually done it quite effectively when he's been put in those spots. And, look, I know he got taken down by Darko, but Darko's wrestling is far more explosive than anything he's going to see here from Danilo. I'm not saying he won't get taken down at all, but I don't think you can project Danilo for more than like 1 to 2 takedowns in this fight. And so it's like, could he insta-sub him if he gets him down? I guess, but if he just sprints back up, maybe not. And I kind of just think Danilo is going to be completely fucked on the feet here. When he goes for those like low singles in the clinch, he's probably going to get hammered on with elbows. When they're standing, look, I don't think Kennedy's stand-up's any good, but he at least throws strikes and he hits relatively hard, whereas Danilo throws almost no strikes, keeps his head on the center line, and doesn't really do anything to move it. I just think Kennedy should be like 60% in this spot. Danilo doesn't set his takedowns up. He's slow. He's not athletic. Kennedy's pretty good in the clinch. Should be able to outstrike him on the feet. Look, he could get taken down and get subbed. Wouldn't overly shock me, but I do think he has the athletic tools here to keep this fight standing, though. How about you?
Yeah, I considered playing Kennedy as well, but just given the fact that I don't really know how he would react if he got his back taken or, put in any sort of really bad spots on the ground, we just haven't seen it. Now, to your point, I'm not a Marquez guy at all in terms of his offensive wrestling. To your point as well, I don't really think that, we've seen massive evolutions in that capacity. I think it's just more so of, one, Ibragimov completely gassed after like 3 minutes. When he did absolutely nothing, it was probably one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. The guy legitimately got tired and didn't do anything. That was even before all of the grappling too. But nonetheless, and then to your point, Mike Rodriguez, that's pretty much been his MO to suck on bottom too. But nonetheless, it was my opinion going into both of those fights as well that I thought both those guys were going to come out here and smoke Marquez, and it just didn't happen. But to your point, I do think Kennedy has a pretty high ceiling. But conversely, I also think, if Marquez is able to get him down, I think his ceiling's pretty high. So it's kind of one of those pick-em based fights where I could see either guy potentially looking like minus 300. And it's those spots where I just would rather avoid. But to your point, Marquez really doesn't possess striking at all defensively or offensively. So honestly, it could be a really good live betting spot where Marquez shoots a takedown like early. And if you can hit live lines in between the rounds and Kennedy just shucks it off, digs one underhook, I'd probably just bet Kennedy right there immediately. Cause that would probably be a good sign for the rest of the fight. If he can stuff the first one and be fine. But yeah, that's my take.
But also, to be clear, if this was at 135 or 145, I probably wouldn't be making this bet because grapplers at 135 or 145 would put hooks in and grab them immediately. But it's at 205, and I kind of think unless he's got Kennedy wrapped up on the way down, even if he gives his back, there's a pretty good chance he's not going to be able to snatch it and get hooks in time. Those are big lumbering guys, and Danilo Marquez is not a great athlete. You know what I mean? Rodriguez just kind of accepted being on his back, whereas Kennedy will pretty much every time he gets taken down, immediately explodes up. So
Kennedy could just be like Derek Lewis or whatever, where he can just turn over and it's impossible to put in hooks on him. So it's fuck the stand-up technician. Who cares? Just
good rule of thumb. Young, durable Nigerian with cardio against old gassy Brazilian and even money. Take the young, durable Nigerian.
I hope it comes through for you, though, John. I think
I do too. I'm gonna be sick. I'll be sick to my stomach if I lose money on another one of these guys' fights. Either of them. So moving on, we got another bet for you, I believe. Here we got Renato Moicano coming back after getting iced and costing me a bunch of money against Rafael Fiziev, taking on Jai Herbert. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I did a ton of tape on this one, and it's another fight that I just like in general, fight violence. I think Moicano probably deserves to be this big of a favorite. Obviously fought the much better guys, but the glaring issue that I still can't get out of my head with him, despite fighting the better guys, is his defense just really hasn't improved one iota. He's, stands relatively tall, chin straight up in the air. Herbert comes forward. He's pretty fast. He's pretty powerful, decent boxer. So in that capacity, I think Herbert's live for a knockout if none of that's been corrected either. But conversely, in both of Herbert's losses, he's been KO'd as well. Despite him moving a lot, the best way I can describe it is I just don't think there's really any process to his movement at all. He just kind of moves to move. He'll move his head, move his feet really fast, but then he still gets hit in the face all the time. So, and Moicano isn't a perennial KO artist, but he's pretty long, has some fast hands, crisp boxing, has some KOs in there too. So to be honest, I think Moicano probably hits harder than Trinaldo and Reese McKee, if I'm being completely honest. And both those guys, pretty much flatlined him. So I think that's there. But really, in my opinion, what Moicano should do, and what I think this fight actually looks like, it looks a lot like the Moicano-Damir Hadzovic fight, where the couple times that Moicano's known that he's had a pretty clear path on the ground, and he's not fighting a guy who has elite level takedown defense or elite level defensive grappling or grappling in general, he will shoot takedowns and he will advance and pass and sub. I think the levels on the ground here are pretty evident. I've seen Herbert get his back taken. I've seen Herbert get mounted a couple times, taken down multiple times. From what he's actually done on bottom, it's not terrible. I've actually seen him get out of some of these bad spots quite a few times, but then again, this is also the best grappler he's fought. And if he makes some of those small positional mistakes against the guy in Moicano is going to sub him. And I feel pretty confident in saying that. So with the correct Moicano approach here, I think he can just take him down and probably sub him in the first round. If not, and they want to go and have a striking affair, do I think Moicano's minus 250 in that spot? Maybe not. But I don't know. We'll see. I think there's 3 finished boxes checked, so I think it's a good fight to target violence.
Nato Moicano is a tragedy, man. Seriously, at one point I thought he was going to be a future champion, but he seems to keep, Jordan, the serious MMA analyst, he's in this chat. He's commented up there if anybody wants to go watch it. Posted a video of basically Moicano getting countered over his jab over and over again, which seems to be exactly what KOs him every time. And to be honest, that's kind of the concern for me here as well. Herbert's a decent boxer. I think Moicano's got him covered everywhere fairly easily. I considered laying the chalk. But, Moicano does get vulnerable in the pocket and doesn't tend to protect himself well. I don't even know if it's a durability issue so much as you look at the shots that Aldo, Zombie, and Fiziev all landed were just square on the chin, each one of them. And it's just because of the positions he's putting himself in. And that worries me. It's probably the only reason I haven't laid the chalk with him, just because, like I said, I don't think skills-wise it's really remotely a close fight. Herbert's fun because he's a good boxer. He hits hard. But, I bet Trinaldo against him, and that fight was close, I think, more because Trinaldo missed weight and gassed out than because of anything Herbert really offered there. But yeah, I still have those same concerns and IQ concerns with Moicano. To your point, though, when he fought Hadzovic, he knew what he needed to do. He went out there, hit a takedown, immediately subbed him. I think Herbert's probably as insta-sub against Moicano as Hadzovic was, to be honest. I think if Moicano chooses the right path, the plus 180 on his sub line might look more like 55-60%. I'm not saying that's where I put it at personally, but I do think the grappling disparity is that wide that if in hindsight we're like, wow, fuck, that was the easiest money on the card, it wouldn't shock me. It's really just a question of if he'll do it. I'm hoping after getting KO'd yet again that he will come out here and do that. I'd like to see him bounce back, and being a more proactive grappler would be a good place to start. But yeah, I think Moicano is seriously the side. I think he should sub Herbert here without much issue. But yeah, I don't fully trust him. I don't really want to lay the chalk. I might take a stab at sub though. And I think Gen's ITD is pretty nice too. Because there's really, Herbert does hit hard. If they do decide to swing, he's got a chance to knock him out. And Moicano's probably got a chance to put him out as well. So yeah, I don't mind it. But yeah, we move on. Here's a fun one. We got Tim Means taking on Nicholas Dalby. I bet Tim Means here. I'll be honest, the line is confusing enough to me that I feel like I must be missing something, and I feel like I'm going to get torched on this. Look, I know Dalby has a way of making fights close, but how does he like his fight against Rodriguez? I thought he pretty clearly lost that fight. I know not everybody agrees with that, but I mean, that seems to me to be his best case scenario here for a win is scraping out a close decision. Whereas, Dalby's guy's been hurt a bunch. Means knocks down a lot of people. Means' output is substantially better. Like I can tell you right now, unless Dalby puts on a wrestling clinic here, Means is going to outland him severely in this fight. Like I can tell you that with absolute 100% certainty. If it goes 15 minutes and spends 10 minutes on the feet, Means is going to outland him badly. Unless he's just completely fallen off the cliff since he beat the brakes off Perry. And I don't even think the Perry fight's that relevant. Just looking at their outputs for their careers, Dalby is not an efficient striker. Means is a remarkably efficient striker. And, Means is a harder hitter. I don't even think Dalby's a better grappler, to be completely honest. Maybe he could hit takedowns, but Means has been a bit more proactive with the grappling as well recently. And so I guess where I come down on it is, look, Dalby does a really good job of minimizing exchanges and keeping fights close. But even with that being the case, Means is the bigger hitter who throws more, who's probably more dangerous both on the mat and on the feet. It's hard for me to, price this better than 65 or worse than 65, 70% for Means. So I played him here. Maybe I'm missing something and this looks bad, but I don't understand the line. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so I took a little poke at Means as well. I know a lot of people reference the Rodriguez fight. One, he got outlanded in that fight, needs to be noted. Two, I don't agree with the decision. Obviously went out there and got deaded by Ronson. And then to be honest, I thought the Oliveira fight was a very winnable fight for Oliveira, where Oliveira kind of just gave it away, in my opinion. And that stand-up was probably one of the worst in UFC history that we've seen in a while. So with all that being said, I mean, there's a very, real close alternate universe where Nicholas Dalby is 0-3 in his second UFC run. And just with that being said, if that, was the case, what's Tim Means here? Probably, minus 250, minus 270. I know it's not the case. And to your point, Dalby has, this propensity to, make fights closer by his style. But after doing my due diligence on it, I think Means is just a pretty decent archetype to beat him. Like even in D-Rod, with as much as D-Rod landed, he's pretty prodding, hook reliant, where Tim Means is, better footwork, stay in your face, pressure, crisp, tight, combo boxing, the faster party, has power of his own. So with that being said, I think Means can kind of cut off Dalby much better than D-Rod did. And to your point, the volume component is there as well. Coupled with the optics of Means is going to go forward for better or for worse. He always has. So once again, minus 150 doesn't make a ton of sense. Could he get sparked? Yeah, we've seen him get dinged a few times, but I mean, even in the fight with Nico Price, I thought he looked pretty solid through the first part of that fight before, I thought he was actually winning minutes and winning the fight before he got clipped, and then didn't look bad in the D-Rod fight either before he got dinged and then subbed too. So, and then to your point, he just went out there and kicked Mike Perry's ass. So, I mean, minus 150, it's kind of like, what? I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but.
No, and I don't think, Dalby, you kind of pointed out with D-Rod, Dalby got away with a lot coming in and out against D-Rod. Like D-Rod wasn't really punishing him when he came into the pocket. I don't think he gets any of those ones or twos for free coming in and out against Means. Means is going to throw at him if he comes forward at him. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's pretty obvious, and maybe we'll look like schmucks, but war Means. Moving on, we got another bet for you here. We got Andre Fili taking on Daniel Pineda. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not another fight I anticipated that I was going to play, but I like Pineda at plus 190, and the big reason is really just going back through the trajectory of Andre Fili. Obviously fought a lot of tough guys in there, but really he's another guy who, based on his style, just has a propensity to be in a shitload of close fights. Even the ones that he's, winning unanimously, like even the 30-27 against Lobov, I mean, still went 55 for 55 on strikes with him. It was just the wrestling that, was what was the difference, because Lobov can't defensively wrestle or grapple. Even, the fights with Dennis Bermudez, really, really close. Couple other ones as well. I think his strike ratio is -2. I mean, the guy only defends strikes, I think, at 55%. Pineda's going to come forward. Pineda's going to let his hands fly. Pineda can wrestle, and what we have seen in Fili's last two losses, in Bryce Mitchell and Sadiq, he looked pretty bad on bottom, if I'm being completely honest. And given that what we just saw from Pineda a little while back over Burns, I mean, largely dominated him on the mat. We're not as high on Mr. Burns on this podcast as some other people were, pre-fight. I think you bet Pineda in that spot, John. But still, nonetheless, pretty impressive. I mean, he completely dominated a relatively high-level black belt on the mat and made it look relatively easy in doing so. So, guys got wins over Habalayev, knocked him out. That guy could easily fight in the UFC today. Jeremy Kennedy, obviously very solid, good sub game. So plus 190, I think Pineda can make it a scrap. The fight with Swanson for him is a little bit disconcerting. Feely could KO him, but Feely's not immune to being hurt either. So with the potential path for Pineda on the ground, his willingness to come forward, hopefully he doesn't gas. The line should just be tighter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm going to play Pineda. I haven't yet. I've been monitoring the line. But, I mentioned it to you before we came on here live, but it's kind of weird the way Pineda's gotten lined in the second UFC stint. Plus 250 against Burns, minus 190 against Swanson, and now plus 190 against Feely. Like, people thought he should be a minus 200 favorite against Cub Swanson, but now that he should be flipped that against Andre Feely, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Look, I get he didn't look great in the Swanson fight, and he looked like he gassed hard. Cub's a much more dangerous striker, though, than Feely, if we're being honest. Cub's also the kind of guy who, when he kind of smells blood in the water, will start letting his hands go a lot, whereas, not that Feely's got a bad pace, but he's not really the guy, he's just going to keep a steady, solid pace. He's not really a guy who's going to step on the gas ever. And, you touched on it a little bit. I haven't really liked how Feely's looked in his last couple fights, at all. Not that he's old or washed, but it's just been weird. The fight with Jourdain was remarkably close and much closer than that fight needed to be honest with you. The next fight with Yusuf, like you mentioned, I bet Yusuf that fight. I did not think Yusuf was going to get almost 6 minutes of top time, though, in that fight and just control him on the mat with ease. And then Mitchell, I bet Mitchell last fight, or I bet Feely against Mitchell. And I still don't think Mitchell's a great wrestler. He's not bad, but he was getting him down, no problem, and controlling him there. I don't know what's happened to him, but it just seems like his grappling seems like it's falling apart, to be honest. And Daniel Pineda is a better wrestler than Bryce Mitchell. Daniel Pineda is probably more dangerous on the ground than Bryce Mitchell is. Like, I feel pretty comfortable saying if Pineda comes out here and looks to grapple aggressively early, he is going to put Feely in bad spots early in this fight and has a fairly strong chance to finish. And even beyond that, look, I get it. Pineda hasn't won a decision, but he also had the fight with Georgie Karkanian where he had the cut. He went to a split decision with Emmanuel Sanchez. His style, yes, he has gassed out in the past many times, but he also has a lot of finishes. His style is conducive to finishes, which is part of it, but we've seen him push himself deep and also not completely gas out. He finished Burns late in round 2 when they fought. So I'm not saying he doesn't have cardio issues. He clearly does, but I'm also saying I think the idea that, at some point the 7-minute mark hits, Feely takes over is kind of ridiculous. We talked about this again to bring up Minner and Rosa. When Minner fought Rosa, I said I like the money line better because, it's not that hard to stay fresh when you're on top of somebody. It's a lot harder when you have to continually work to get them down. And we saw that in that fight. And I kind of think it's a similar dynamic. I think Pineda's live for a finish, but if you told me he can ride out on top of Feely here for 3 rounds, I wouldn't be totally shocked. You know what I mean? Because I think he's going to get dominant positions here. So, yeah, I mean, I think the line's wide. I'd probably line this closer to, I don't want to say evens. I'd say they're probably slightly into Feely just because, there are concerns with Pineda. But Pineda's got much more finishing upside. He's the better grappler. He's the more dangerous fighter in general. That kind of guy usually shouldn't be Ryan below 35%. So I'm with you there. We move on. We got another. This is probably the best fight of the card, to be honest. We got Raoni Barcelos taking on Timur Valiev. I bet Valiev. I think it's funny because I was ready to bet Julio Arce against Valiev when they were booked. And after going deep taping Valiev for this fight, I actually think he probably would have torched Arce, if I'm being honest. I just think he's got more tools. Both of these guys are the goods. Like, I think the world of Barcelos, but he's getting lined as minus 240 against a guy who's probably comparable everywhere. Like, I'd say Barcelos has better boxing. in the pocket, but I think Valiev has a lot more tools on the feet than Barcelos does, especially with his kicks. Their speed's probably a little similar. My one concern with Valiev is maybe he gets stuck on bottom, but his wrestling is clearly improved, and he may try to shoot takedowns himself. I don't know. My gut with this fight is it's going to be a very high volume fight that ends up being a close decision. Like, it's hard for me to unsee with Barcelos as much as I like him. The Kurt Hollabaugh fight, people forget it, but Kurt Hollabaugh was, I don't want to say tuning him up. That was a close fight, but Hollabaugh was landing on him consistently. And I guess my view here is if Barcelos can't get off a consistent pressure and basically consistently keep Valiev against the cage and Valiev can get his movement going, it's going to be a very close fight. Valiev's going to land a lot of strikes. And so I favor Barcelos ever so slightly here. I put him at about 55% myself, but I think there's a case for Valiev anywhere over like plus 150, to be honest. So I took a small stab at plus 184. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not giving Valiev as much credence personally, but I definitely can see it. I do still think the line's wide. I think I put Barcelos like 65% or something like that. I just think he's the better fighter. Been pretty difficult to beat historically. I know you touched on the Holloway fight. There's some definite concerns there, but I do have some questions in terms of Valiev's just overall defensive grappling. I feel like Barcelos could just tie him in a knot, if I'm being completely honest, or even if when like the takedown sequences are engaged against the fence, it seems like Valiev can just be kind of like bull explosive, try to stand up. And I feel like there might be opportunities to grab necks, grab backs in those type of scenarios too. Barcelos, obviously a high level black belt. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate the stabs on value. I guess gun to my head from a value perspective, I'd probably be more inclined to take the shot on Valiev, but it's a pass for me. I still reasonably favor Barcelos though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you because it's like that's why it's a small play for me because it's one of those things where the confidence interval is pretty low. Like if Barcelos can't hold him down, it probably looks like an even money fight. But yeah, there is the chance that he can just put him on his back and keep him there, or sub him. So moving on, we got how the fuck did this become the co-main event? We have OSP taking on Tanner Boser. Luke, what are your thoughts here?
Oh man. This is probably one of the more volatile fights on the card, in my opinion. I guess my assessment is pretty much OSP early. Boser survives the first round. Probably a good sign. Probably just wins the decision. Don't think heavyweight OSP is particularly encouraging. I know from like a numeric standpoint, he actually landed more strikes in his fight with Rothwell than he has in a lot of his 205 fights. But I think that's more so of just like prodding, go forward, Ben Rothwell. I just like to be hit in the face, Ben Rothwell type of thing more than anything. But yeah, from what we've seen from Boser, at least on bottom in the Latifi fight, not particularly encouraging for this matchup. But the thing with OSP is he's just not really a guy you can rely on to necessarily be diving on legs or shooting takedowns. However, he is one of those guys where he might only need one, and he might only need one here, given from what we've seen from Boser on bottom hasn't been encouraging. But if Boser is able to stuff, I think he just pretty much cruises his way to a decision. He plays that, outside heavyweight point game, more active, that type of deal. I honestly think the power of Boser has always been a little bit overrated. So I know people talk about, him maybe finishing OSP. OSP's been finished before, sure, but I more so see Boser kind of just peppering his way to a decision. But that first round probably going to be pretty hairy.
If you could tell me for a fact how many takedowns OSP attempts here, I could give you an almost dead certain prediction of how this fight's going to go. Like, in your words, homeboy attempted 0 takedowns against Jamal Hill when I had a bet on him in his last fight. Like, what the fuck was that, man? It was so frustrating. And to be clear, like, I don't think OSP is any kind of, elite grappler or anything like that, but he's obviously got a crafty submission game, and against the guy who was always going to outvolume him on the feet, to just not even try to get it there was nuts. He attempted no takedowns against Alonzo Menafield either in the fight before that. Going back the fight before that against Rothwell, he attempted no takedowns in that fight as well. The two fights that really stick in my craw here, and the reason I'm not playing Boser is the Krylov fight where he attempted, I think, 8 takedowns in about 7 minutes. And then the fight before that with Reyes where he attempted 7 takedowns. Now, in fairness, he was on the verge of literally getting put in a casket against Reyes that entire fight. So that's probably partially why he did it. For the Krylov fight, he came out with a grappling heavy approach. And it's like, do I expect him to do that? No. But it's like, if I place a bet on Boser as a favorite and OSP dives on legs in the first 30 seconds, I'm going to go put my head in the blender. Like that's you know, like that's where I am. It's like, I favor Boser fairly significantly on the feet. No, he doesn't throw a ton of head strikes, but the volume is just so much more reliable. He's a durable guy. I'm very confident Boser is going to go out there and outland him significantly. It's just, like I said, I don't even think OSP is a great grappler per se, but I don't think Boser has any kind of get-up game at all. And so it's like a takedown on top could be the round or a submission. And so I can't lay it at minus 185. You know, at evens, I probably would take the risk, but OSP is too unpredictable. I wish he was more predictable. Then I wouldn't lose so much money on his fights. But yeah.
I don't know. I think if you are to play it, just playing Boser by points around evens is probably the way to go. But like I said, still to your point, even whether you're laying the chalk on Boser or you're playing the decision, OSP goes up there, dives on legs, you're still gonna look like a dipshit. Either
or
way.
Boser punches him in the eye and he shells up because his eye hurts. Yeah. Was that Pessoa that did that last summer?
Or just knees him in the groin and no contest, of course, because that seems to be the common theme.
I mean, hopefully that actually happens 30 seconds into this fight, so we all get spared it, to be honest. But moving on, we have a fire fight. We got Alexander Volkov taking on Cyril Gane. To be honest, like, they're not saying it, but couldn't you see Dana just giving the winner of this to Francis instead of Derek Lewis? I mean, maybe they'll make Derek Lewis because it's fun, but, if he's going to have issues with John Jones, this is a pretty good alternative. If Jones isn't going to come out there and fight him, one of these guys. But, yeah, it's an exciting fight. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so I guess I'm contrarian but not contrarian at the same time. It seems like everybody loves Volkov this week, and I get it to some perspective for sure. Like 5x the amount of experience, battle tested, solid metrics. Gone, hasn't been overtly tested. I get that, but it's more so of a stylistic thing for me than anything. I think the large majority of guys that have fought Volkov just largely kind of stay in front of him and just kind of allow him to get off on that volume boxing based game plan, where Gane's not going to do that. He's going to move. And pretty much really when guys are landing on Gane, they're pretty much just landing only solo shots. Very rarely have guys even been able to, string together 2, 3, 4 punch combinations on him. Could Volkov do that? Sure. I mean, it's the best guy he's fought for sure. But I'm just saying, based on Gane's movement, I think it's going to be more difficult for Volkov, who's more of a, flat-footed, walk forward kickboxer type of guy, and not making the direct comparison to Volkov and Rosenstruck, but that's kind of what Rosenstruck is too in some capacity. So yeah, I think the line is, I honestly, I would play Gane at like minus 150. To be honest, I probably wouldn't play it heavily. Maybe like a unit and a half, maybe like 1.75. But I understand the angle of more of like a questions answered, back to vet. It's heavyweight too. In general, not a huge fan of playing the chalk at heavyweight, but I don't know. I did quite a bit of tape on this one. I feel decent about my read on the fight, but heavyweight has not been kind to me this year. So I'm honestly kind of fine if I just stay away from it too, but I like Gane.
Luke, it's Russia versus France. All the French know how to do is quit. No, I'm just kidding.
Vive la France.
I'm just kidding. I mean, I actually like Gane quite a bit as a prospect. There's a lot to like. He's obviously a capable grappler, which you don't find in heavyweights very often. Has great cardio, which you don't find in heavyweights very often, and has incredible output. Like I said, there's a lot to like about Gane. I think he's got a very bright future, maybe even a championship future. That said, I do think the line's getting a little carried away here. I played Volkov myself at plus 145. I guess my view is, look, I played him small only for a unit. Like, it's not like I expect Volkov to come out here and dust him easily. But when thinking about the fight for me, it's like in the big cage, I think I'd give a bit more credence to Gane just because I think, it's a lot more room for him to kind of get off and do what he does. Obviously he's been able to play that game with Rosenstruck and Dos Santos. And I don't necessarily agree with you that, what's it called? That, Volkov's somewhat plotting, but I also think his movement's a lot better than JDS 2021 and Jairzinho Rosenstruck. And on top of that, Gane, he plays that get in and get out game very, very well. But he's going to have for the first time in his career, it's like serious size parity here. Volkov's actually taller. I think he's only an inch or two less in reach. And so, that's kind of a tricky thing to navigate because you don't really find many 6'7" heavyweights. And also, unlike Rosenstruck, where, Gane was able to get a lot of stuff for free in that fight because Jairzinho is always looking for the perfect shot and really not doing a whole lot else when he's not doing that. He's not going to get entries into the pocket for free here. And so I think that makes it an interesting fight because, obviously Gane's best attribute is his movement and his volume. Volkov actually keeps the same amount of volume that Gane does. On top of that, we haven't seen Gane really have to, he had to deal with low kicks from Boser, but Boser's not a kicker on the level of Volkov here. And, I think the inside low kick there is going to be there for Volkov. And if he can slow Gane down here and force more pocket exchanges, I don't want to say it's necessarily trouble for Gane. Maybe Gane can win that fight, but I'm inclined to think Volkov can outvolume pretty much anybody in the pocket. And, on top of that, I think Volkov has considerably higher finishing upside than Gane does in this fight. So for me, it's like, I see the angle on Gane, but I think the small cage probably forces more exchanges here. I think Volkov's the guy with the finishing upside. Plus, he's got a fairly big experience edge. And so it's hard for me to see this much past evens on either side. You could sell me on Volkov small favorite. You could sell me on Gane as a small favorite here. I think it's a close fight. If Gane just walks through Volkov, he's probably going to be a champion as long as his chin can hold up against Francis. Big if, but that's probably the case. I just think Volkov brings a lot of things that no other heavyweight does. I mean, the reality of the situation is they're the only two heavyweights, I believe, on earth or in the UFC history who for their careers average more than 6 significant strikes landed a minute. It's pretty interesting to me just because I think Volkov hits a bit harder. Now, maybe that volume gets suppressed, but if it doesn't, you're talking about a very close fight. I think it's going to go 5 rounds, to be honest. I understand an angle on the under, but yeah, just generally give me the guy who's the bigger finisher with the better strength schedule, more experience, who can match his output. I'm on Volkov small. It's not super confident, but I do think he's the side personally. So with that said, Luke, do you have any other plays you want to give out for Bellator, PFL, anything?
I just kind of started looking at it today. I don't have anything out yet. I'm interested in Weichel. There's a couple more fights I want to look at. PFL, I don't really know, to be honest. I haven't looked at that one yet much yet, just more so looked at Bellator.
Yeah, just play Showtime and Weichel. That's that. Seriously, I am on Showtime this week. I kind of think if he loses to Raush Manfio, it's time to hang it up. This is not a fight he should lose. He should take care of business. And yeah, I'm also on Weichel. I think it's a pretty huge step up for Keone Diggs here. But yeah, guys.
I guess real quick, John. At least in regards to Pettis, though, probably shouldn't have lost to Clay Collard.
At least Collard's at least an athlete, though, right?
I don't really know much about the other guy, but I'm just saying in general, I don't think he probably should have lost to Clay Collard either, but just saying.
I know. I got minus 170. I don't know that I'd lay the minus 200, to be honest, but I do think he's the side. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. As always, I'm your host, John Stargarian. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox. And with Luke at SWR_betting. Please, again, if you like the show, drop a like and subscribe. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week, same time as always, and Lags will be there with us too. Guys, thanks for coming out. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Hopefully we make some money this time. Take it easy.